He fought for a country that swore it never leaves a man behind. But when he came back from the battlefield, it had already stolen everything. His daughter was adopted. His wife had remarried. His bank accounts were closed, and his name officially marked Kia, the man who filled out that report, his own commanding officer who now lived in his house with his family. And when he knocked on the door, his daughter screamed, "Mom, there's a strange man outside." That's when he realized they never told her he existed. Homecoming isn't a place. It's a question. The bus pulled away in a gust of engine breath and gravel dust, and Jacob Reese stood still long after it was gone. One hand clenched around the dog tags that hadn't left his palm since Kabul. The other hand hung like a ghost beside him, nerves still forgetting there was no rifle to carry. His boots desert brown, and split at the seam, sank slightly into the soft earth of the sidewalk. His house, if he could still call it that, sat at the end of the street. White paint flaking like old skin, shutters ajar like blinking eyes. Too tired to stay closed, the porch sagged. The gutter hung low on one corner like a broken limb. He hadn't seen it in 2 years. And yet, something deeper than time told him it wasn't the same place he'd left. He adjusted the strap of his bag and walked toward it. Each step sounded too loud in a neighborhood that once welcomed him with chalk drawings and barbecue smoke. The grass was knee-high. Dandelions had conquered the yard. When he reached the gate, he noticed it first. The nameplate was gone. Not rusted, not faded, gone. In its place, only 4 screw holes in the wood. He reached out, almost expecting the cold metal letters to still be there. He used to run his fingers over the var in Reese before unlocking the gate. Today, he pushed it open with a whine and stepped into someone else's silence. The front door looked familiar, but the welcome Matt Reed live lava phrase, Emma, had once mocked in a gift shop. She said if they ever had one, she'd burn it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old brass key. Turned it. It stopped halfway, jammed. He tried again, harder this time. The lock didn't budge. Behind him, a window curtain shifted. He turned. A boy 10, maybe 11 watched from the adjacent house. The boy ducked when Jacob met his eyes. Kids used to wave when he came home in uniform. He knocked. 3 slow, hesitant knocks. Waited. No sound. He knocked again, firmer, still. Nothing. He stepped back and looked up just above the doorframe, where they'd once taped their daughter's finger-painted flag. It was gone. The staples remained. The silence pressed harder now. Not just absence, erasure. He walked around the side of the house, his boots brushing brittle leaves. Through the back window, he saw the kitchen light fixture still hanging crooked. He'd meant to fix that the week before his last deployment. But the table beneath it was different. Sleek, round. Not the scarred oak they'd bought after their wedding. The yard had changed too. No swing set. No garden. Only the tree remained. And nailed to it, freshly painted, were 3 numbers he didn't recognize. Not his house number. He walked to the front again. Sat on the porch steps. Set the duffel beside him, placed the dog tags in his lap, and stared. 10 minutes passed before he heard the cautious creak of a screen door across the street. The neighbor, a woman in her 50s, hair wrapped in a scarf, arms folded, stepped out like someone stepping into a crime scene. Jacob? Her voice was different, measured. He stood. Mrs. Elkins. She didn't move closer. He cleared his throat, swallowed sand. Is Emma here? Her mouth twitched. Not quite a frown. Not quite a smile. Oh, honey, she said. They said you died. The words floated for a second, absurd and unfitting, until they landed. They said you died, Jacob. A year ago. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. What? Your commanding officer, Cole something. He told us. There was a ceremony, the flag. I'm so sorry. He staggered 1 step backward. No, that's not. I was metavased. 6 surgeries. Germany, then Bethesda. They sold the house, Jacob. The world blurred, as if the ground had shifted sideways, but Emma, she moved. I think remarried? Her voice trailed. A man who looked after her. She had your little girl with her. He closed his eyes. She didn't come back for anything, the neighbor whispered. Not your things. Not the letters. Letters. He opened the bag and pulled out a faded, crumpled stack of sealed envelopes, all addressed to Emma, never opened, never returned. His handwriting on every one. He sent 47 letters. The war wasn't what silenced them. He held them out, but Mrs. Elkins stepped back. I can't take those. A bird called once, sharply, and the sky cracked open with a growl of thunder. She turned to go, paused, then said gently, There's a real estate sign on the side yard. Might still have the agent's info. Jacob didn't move. Didn't respond when she closed her door. The whole street seemed to exhale, relieved it no longer had to explain. A slow drizzle began. He stayed seated. The letters in his lap began to darken, one spot at a time. Rain is quiet until it hits paper. He stood. Walked to the tree. Touched the numbers with trembling fingers. Behind them, the bark still held the faint heart Emma had. Carved in 09, inside it, J+E, below it, come home safe. The words were almost invisible now. He turned back to the house. In the reflection of the front window, he saw something move. A figure, male. Broad dash, shouldered, watching, then gone. Silence again. He didn't knock this time. He placed one letter at the doorstep, carefully, as if it were glass. Then he stepped back. Into the street. One boot, then the other. And without turning around, he whispered to no one. They said you died, Jacob, a year ago. Some silences screamed louder than gunfire. The crayon broke in her fingers, and she didn't even flinch. He watched from the chain-link fence just past the parking lot, breath caught between ribs that never healed right. Her pigtails were uneven. She always hated that. Emma used to redo them twice before school photos. But today, they bobbed as she leaned over the paper in her lap, coloring stars into a construction paper sky. Jacob stepped closer. His boots crunched softly on the mulch near the oak tree. It was the kind of noise that would have made her turn around once. She didn't look up. She was smaller than he remembered, but the shape of her hands, her left thumb curling inward. When she held a crayon was his, he stood still. So still it felt like penance. On the bench beside her, a pink lunchbox sat open, a half-eaten sandwich drying in the breeze. Tucked inside the lid was a small note in a child's scribble. To Daddy, thank you for the moon. Jacob blinked. Hard. Another man's voice broke the stillness. Warm, familiar to her. It called from behind the school building. Sophie, sweetheart, time to go. Her head snapped up. She smiled. She called out clear and sure. Coming, Daddy. Jacob's throat burned. She ran past him without seeing him, her drawing trailing behind her, caught by the wind. It spun once, twice, then landed at his feet. He bent down and picked it up. It was a picture of 3 people. A tall man, a woman with brown hair, and a little girl between them, holding both hands. All 3 smiled beneath a sky full of stars. The stars were uneven. Some were red, some black, none were gold. She used to only draw them gold. He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket, and looked up. A tall man stood beside the school gate now, holding Sophie's backpack. He looked up and saw Jacob. For a moment, neither moved. Then the man nodded, polite, maybe cautious, maybe confused. Jacob didn't nod back. His hands were fists inside his coat. Emma appeared next. She touched the man's arm lightly and pointed toward the parking lot, toward Jacob. The man said something. She shook her head. Then she walked toward him. No yelling, no rush, just the slow gait of someone carrying years inside her bones. When she reached him, she didn't speak right away. She looked at his face like it was a language she once knew but forgot how to read. Finally she whispered, "Jacob?" It cracked. "Something open in him. I saw her," he said. "She's drawing stars now," Emma swallowed. Her lip trembled, but she didn't let it fall apart. She looked over her shoulder. Sophie was busy tying her shoe. "She doesn't know you," she said quietly. "She used to fall asleep holding my finger. She was 3, Emma said. She doesn't remember. I wrote every month," he said. "You never replied." Emma closed her eyes. "They told me you were dead, Jacob, for a year." He said nothing. I couldn't breathe for weeks. I had to learn how to get out of bed again, for her. He looked away. She reached into her purse and pulled out something small worn at the fond drawer. Corners. A photo. From before. Sophie asleep on Jacob's chest, both of them covered in a wool blanket. He remembered the night. The wind was rattling the windows, but she'd stopped crying the moment she'd touched his shirt. "She keeps this in her drawer," Emma said, voice cracking. "She doesn't know why she hides it." Jacob took the photo, ran his thumb along the creased edge. "She's mine," he said softly. Emma's eyes welled. "And he's been there every day since the funeral. He didn't steal her. He stayed when I couldn't get out of bed." He made her laugh again. "Grief doesn't always come wearing black. Sometimes it brings crayons and patience. I didn't." "Bury you, Jacob," Emma whispered. "But I had to let something go, or I would have drowned." He looked down. The stars on the drawing were smudged now, rain beginning to spit from the gray clouds above. "You changed her name." Emma shook her head. "No, just her middle name, to mine. Reese is still hers." It hit him harder than he thought. "I don't want to take her away," he said. "But I want her to know who I am." Emma's lips pressed into a line. "She's not ready. I am." "That doesn't matter." Silence sat between them like a fourth presence. The wind tossed a leaf against his boot. Then Sophie called again, her voice echoing. "Mom can we get ice cream?" Jacob looked over, her eyes his. Her hair Emma's, her voice? Someone else's now. Emma stepped back. "Please don't do this today. I didn't come for a scene." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Please go." The words landed with surgical cruelty, not shouted, not argued. Just placed gently in his chest like a shard of glass. He thought grief was loud until he met quiet denial. He watched as she turned and walked away. She took 2 steps, then stopped and looked back. "She still sleeps with that blanket," Emma said. "The one you used to wrap her in." Jacob stood frozen as she walked away again. Sophie slipped her hand into the man's, looked up at him, smiled. He kissed her forehead. Jacob stepped backward, 1 foot, then the other. He turned and walked to his truck, fingers brushing the folded drawing in his pocket. He sat in the front seat, engine off, staring at the wheel. Somewhere in the back of the glove compartment was an envelope. The first letter he ever wrote from the hospital bed. Addressed to Sophie. Never sent. He pulled it out, unfolded it. Inside, 1 pressed daisy, faded brown. It had fallen from her hair the day he left. He read the letter 1 more time, then placed it beside him on the seat, and watched the family drive away through the rain, until the red brake lights were swallowed by the curve in the road. He wasn't just forgotten, he was erased. It's easier to bury a man on paper than in soil. The plastic chair creaked beneath him, the kind made for waiting, not comfort. Jacob rubbed his thumb across the barcode of his military ID again, like friction could restore whatever access it used to carry. Across the room, an old clock ticked, with the patience of a funeral bell. Its sound didn't fill the silence. It underlined it. He glanced around. Bulletin boards littered with faded flyers, grief groups, PTSD hotlines, job retraining sessions that no one ever attended. The kind of room built for men like him alive, but not quite. The woman at the front desk wore a bright purple cardigan, shipped pink polish on her fingers. She typed with deliberate rhythm, then paused. "Sir," she said softly, "your ID isn't in the system." Jacob leaned forward. "That's impossible. It worked at Bethesda. I've been using it for 6 months." She tilted her head. "I believe you, but the system says otherwise. Could you step into records? Maybe they can figure it out." Records smelled like old air and printer ink. A man in his 60s with wireframe glasses and too many coffee. Stains on his tie motioned Jacob to a desk in the back. "Name?" "Staff Sergeant Jacob Reese." The man clicked, typed, stopped out a longer pause this time. "Reese," he repeated. "You sure that's the name?" Jacob exhaled through his nose. "Pretty sure." The man clicked again. The printer next to him whirred. He retrieved a manila folder, edges curled. A rubber band holding it closed. When he handed it over, his hand shook just slightly. Across the tab, someone had written in thick red marker, "Kia, Reese." "Jacob, seeing your own death certificate is a feeling the body doesn't know how to process." Jacob opened the file. Photocopies. A few emails. A casualty report. He skimmed 3rd-degree burns, internal trauma, non-responsive, location, Kandahar. A date. A signature. Then another document form. DD 1300. Report of casualty, stamped and signed. He read the signature once, then again. LT. Cole Mathers. He turned the page. Another form. Same name. He felt his throat close. A memory pierced the haze. The sound of rubble cracking, heat washing over his skin. Cole's voice shouting his name, the pull of hands. Then black. He hadn't seen Cole since. "Is this some kind of mistake?" Jacob asked, voice scraping low. The clerk shrugged. "We only go off what's submitted. Someone certified this in country. Saad remains were unrecoverable, but they medevaced me." The man nodded. "Sometimes units get bad intel. Sometimes it's paperwork delays. But your file was closed." Jacob held up the form. "Why would Cole sign this? That's your CO?" Jacob nodded slowly. The man shifted. "Sometimes people sign what they're told to. You weren't exactly top brass, were you?" "No. But he pulled me out. He also buried you, looks like." "Burial without a body isn't just a mistake, it's a strategy." Jacob sat back. The scar behind his left ear burned. His fingers switched. "I need this corrected." The man nodded. "We'll have to open an appeal. That takes time, possibly months. You'll need witnesses, medical records, command chain approvals. I have all of that. You'll also need to prove intent if you're pursuing legal. I just want the truth." The man looked at him a long moment, then pushed the folder forward. "Keep it. It's your ghost, after all." On the way out, Jacob sat on a bench just outside the building. Pulled out a cigarette he hadn't smoked since Kabul. Lit it. The wind tasted like November. Cold and metallic. He flipped through the papers again. Every line, every form, each stamped page was another nail in a coffin that never held him. He reached the casualty report again, scanned the witness statements. And there it was again. Witness, LT Cole Mathers, 3 times. Different forms, different wording. Same signature. And one line, buried halfway down a report from the field. Reese sustained mortal injuries. Immediate KIA, no need for evac. He laughed once, dry, bitter. He remembered the sound of chopper blades that day. He remembered being told, "You weren't supposed to wake up." The paper shook in his hands. Not from the wind. He turned to the back page. Something clipped there. A photo. Him, in uniform. Stiff, unsmiling. Emma had taken that photo on their front porch. Sophie's fingers gripped the edge of his pant leg. Barely in frame, but the photo hid something worse. There was a second photo. A cropped version. Only his face. Labeled confirmed in handwritten red ink. He stared at the ink for a long time. The loop on the F, the slash of the D, the handwriting felt wrong. Not Cole's, not anyone from his unit. Confirmed. Like he was a package. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small thumb drive wrapped in gauze. The med tech at Bethesda had given it to him. Saw it was found on his gear, near the blast site. Jacob hadn't plugged it in yet. He was afraid of what it might hold. But now he needed answers. He held it tight in his hand. Cole had dragged him out of that fire. Screamed his name, ordered. The EVSC. And somewhere between the field and the report, something changed. He thought about the last thing Cole ever said to him. Back in the barracks. There are worse ways to disappear than death, Reese. Trust me. At the time, it sounded like gallows humor. Now it sounded like intent. Some men fight for their country. Some just clear the way for themselves. He stood up. Walked toward the parking lot. His reflection followed him in the dark window of the Veterans Building. He stopped. Looked at himself. The man in the glass didn't look like a soldier anymore. Didn't look dead, either. He looked like someone who had been made into a mistake, but mistakes could be corrected. He slid the file into his duffel bag and tucked the flash drive beside it. The man who saved his life stole it. Home doesn't vanish. It's taken. The street hadn't changed, not really. The maple tree still leaned slightly toward the cracked sidewalk. The same rusted bicycle frame lay half buried beneath a hedge, as if time had politely stepped aside, but never left. Jacob walked slowly, boots scuffing asphalt, a sound too heavy for a neighborhood that once rang with laughter. It was the fifth house on the left, white, peeling. The porch had new paint, but the latticework still carried the hole Sophie had kicked during a tantrum. She was 4. He'd told her stories about dragons living under the house just to make her laugh. Now someone had planted tulips beside the stairs, bright, clean rows of color. Too neat. Emma had never liked order that precise. He stepped onto the walkway. A dog barked behind the door, deep, territorial, unfamiliar. Even the animals knew he no longer belonged. He approached the porch. There, nailed beside the doorframe, was a polished brass plate. Mathers, the sight made his stomach roll. He hadn't expected to see it written so plainly, so officially. Not just a betrayal. A declaration. He raised his hand to knock, then dropped it. Instead, he reached beneath the wooden railing, fingers feeling along the underside until they hit the groove. It was still there, the tiny notch he'd carved. 1 week before deployment. JR plus E equals senior. Sophie Reese. He stepped back. No one came to the door. The barking stopped. He circled the house, drawn to the side gate. It was unlocked. The latch clicked softly under his hand. He entered the backyard. Gone was the rusting grill he and Emma had bought at a garage sale. Gone the tire swing. The stone garden path remained, but it was lined with white stones now. Bleach clean and soul-less. He walked to the window near what used to be Sophie's room. The curtains were open. Inside, a guest bed, gray sheets, a desk stacked with unopened mail. He kept going, to the back porch. The wind shifted and caught a wind chime glass in copper. It rang sharp, unnatural, and he hated how loud it felt against the silence he carried. He found himself at the front again, staring at the mailbox. The same one Emma painted blue because black felt too cold. It had chipped now. But there was a letter inside. He opened the box. The envelope was yellowed. The edges curled like they'd been waiting too long. It was addressed in a looping, careful hand. Staff SGT, Jacob Reese, 2417 Cypress Lane. No return address. No stamp. Just a name. His name. He hesitated, then opened it right there on the porch. Inside, folded neatly, a photo of Sophie. 5 years old. Blue dress, barefoot, standing in front of a chalkboard with first day of kindergarten scrawled behind. Her smile was small, a little unsure. He remembered that day, he'd missed it. But Emma had sent him a version of that same photo once. Years ago. This one was different. This one had her face crossed out in red ink. His hands trembled. Grief is heavy, but rage is sharp. He turned the photo over. No message. No markings. But the gesture was loud enough. He stared at the photo again. The X wasn't a single line. It had been redrawn. Over and over. As if someone needed to make sure she vanished completely. He sat down on the porch steps, the wood still warm from the sun. Across the street, Mrs. Lowell, an old neighbor, stepped out to water her plants. She looked up, saw him, froze. He raised a hand slightly. She blinked. Her mouth parted like she wanted to say something. Then she turned and went back inside. Even the people who once knew him didn't want to remember. He slid the photo back into the envelope, tucked it into his coat pocket. As he stood, the front door opened. Cole stood there. In sweatpants. A faded sweatshirt. Coffee in hand. He looked older, less soldier, more suburban. Hair thinner. Lines under his eyes. But still Cole, the man who once pulled him from rubble. The man who'd called him brother. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. The dog pushed past Cole's legs, sniffed toward Jacob, growled low. Jacob stepped back instinctively. The dog bared its teeth. Cole gave a whistle, short, sharp, and the dog stopped. Returned to the doorframe. I thought you were dead, Cole said finally, quiet, almost respectful. You made sure of that. Jacob replied. Cole looked away, took a sip of coffee. Emma told me you were at the school. She didn't know, Jacob said. Neither did Sophie. They know now, Jacob nodded. You live here? Cole glanced over his shoulder into the house. Yeah. For how long? 16 months. Jacob looked at the tulips. Again, nice flowers. She likes them. She always hated straight lines. She's different now. No, Jacob said. She's surviving. A long pause passed between them. Cole looked at the ground. I didn't plan this. But you signed it. I thought you were dead, Cole repeated. Louder this time. You didn't wait for the body. There wasn't one to wait for. Jacob stepped forward. Just one step. I trusted you, he said. You held my daughter. You stood in my home. And then you became me. Cole's voice cracked. I didn't become you. I became what she needed. There it was. A flicker, a wound, not evil. Just weakness dressed as comfort. Jacob nodded once. Even dogs know I don't belong here anymore. Cole looked at him, then really looked. You never stop belonging. That's the part that scared her. The worst betrayals aren't done in hatred, but in convenience. Jacob walked down the steps, the porch creaking behind him. He paused at the mailbox, ran his hand along the blue. Paint over the flakes, the cracks. Inside was nothing else. Just space. And somewhere inside the house, Sophie's laugh rang out high, clear, fading into silence. Jacob didn't turn around. He didn't need to. Inside the envelope, a photo of his daughter, aged 5, with her face crossed out in red. Paper. Lies, but ink stains everything. Jacob hadn't planned to come back to the records office. Not after the last visit, not after seeing his own death signed in someone else's hand. But there was something about the way the ink curled on the form, too clean, too soon. It haunted him. Like a shadow that didn't match the light. He arrived just before closing. The lights buzzed a little louder than usual. Maybe it was the hour. Or maybe buildings like this always carried the echo of unfinished business. The woman behind the counter was different this time. Mid-40s, nervous smile. Wedding ring that looked too tight. Her name tag read Elmero. I'm not supposed to talk to you, she said, voice low, after he slid his ID across the counter. Jacob leaned in. Then don't. Just nod if there's something off. She didn't nod. Didn't blink. Instead, she looked around the empty room and said, Wait here. She disappeared down a hallway marked internal use only. He watched the door for 5 minutes. Then 10. When she returned, she held a file in both hands like it was radioactive. No rubber band this time. No red marker across the top. Just a tab, plain and white. Reese Jacob D. She placed it on the counter. This is the original. He furrowed his brow. I've already seen it. She shook her head. No, what you saw was the closed copy. She flipped it open to a page near the middle and tapped a line with her nail. Read the date. He did. Then again. The date of injury listed was April 3rd. He had deployed on April 17th. His injuries, the blast, the evacuation, those hadn't happened until mid-May. But here on government paper, it said, he was wounded before his boots even. Touched foreign soil. It was submitted 6 weeks before the IED went off. She said that. Jacob looked up slowly. That's impossible. She turned the page. Another document. Death report. Dated April 5th. Stamped. Filed. Signed by LTC Mathers. Someone had killed him. Before the war even had the chance. He stepped back. His body ached in places that had healed already. His skin remembered fire. But this was colder than anything he'd felt on the field. They wrote me off. He muttered. She nodded once. I shouldn't be showing you this, she whispered. But you have a right to know. He looked at her. Why are you helping me? She swallowed hard. My brother died in 2007. They called it friendly fire. We got 3 versions of the report. None of them made sense. I stopped. Trusting official years ago. Jacob turned another page. There was a requisition for military housing. A request for transfer of benefits. The name of the recipient? Emma Reese. Filed and processed. April 11th. Before she ever heard he was dead. Or maybe before she was ever supposed to question it. He stared at the paper, heart hammering against the walls of his ribs. Do you have anything on who filed this? He asked. She hesitated. Then opened a drawer and pulled out a small slip of yellow carbon paper. Most people don't know these exist anymore, she said, but back then, you had to file a Form 52 by hand before it went into the digital system. This one never made it that far. She slid it to him, a name, a date, and a scribbled note at the bottom. Secure housing. Subject not expected to recover. The signature was almost illegible, but it wasn't Cole's. It was someone else's. Someone Jacob hadn't seen in years, but the handwriting, it prickled something deep in his chest. A long-forgotten supply officer. Always quiet. Always watching. A man who once owed Cole more than a favor. Jacob stepped away from the counter. You can't make copies? He asked. She shook her head. Not from this side of the wall. But if I left with it, they'd know. She lowered her voice. I could get fired, or worse. Jacob nodded. Thought for a moment. Then pulled out his phone. Snapped 3 quick photos. One of each page. You never saw me, he said. I didn't, she replied. And if anyone asks, you weren't here. He turned to leave. Her voice stopped him. They say paper can't hurt anyone, she said. He looked back. But that file hurt you. It still is. Some lies aren't told. They're archived. He stepped outside. The air had cooled, the sky dimming into a soft bruise. His fingers shook as he lit a cigarette, something he'd quit, but now felt earned. Across the lot, a sedan sat idling. Tinted windows. Unmoving. He didn't stare. Didn't walk fast. But he knew. They were watching, not because of what he knew now, but because he wasn't supposed to survive long enough to ask. He walked to his truck, closed the door softly, rested his forehead against the wheel. Inside his jacket pocket, he still carried the photo of Sophie. The one with her face crossed out. He pulled it out. Looked at it again. This time, not as grief, but as motive. This wasn't about a child. This was about clearance. About someone needing him erased neatly, cleanly, before the wrong question. Got asked Dot or the right answer came back. He opened his glove box, pulled out the thumb drive. Wrapped in gauze. Dot, it clicked against the USB port like a trigger. Then he pulled out a small black notebook. One he hadn't touched since recovery. Pages filled with names, dates, fragments of conversations he couldn't forget. He turned to a page he never meant to reread. There, scribbled years ago, Cole promised housing if Reese transfer falls. Through timeline, urgent. March 29th. He stared at the ink until it blurred. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. This hadn't started when he left. Dot. It had started weeks before he ever boarded the plane. Someone needed. Jacob gone before he died. Truth leaves fingerprints in forgotten pages. The shop smelled like old glue and dust, the kind of scent that settled in the lungs and made you forget what year it was. Jacob had wandered in by accident, he told himself that. But the truth was, places like this had a way of pulling people who'd been left behind. The bell above the door hadn't rung when he walked in. Another kind of silence greeted him. One that creaked with broken clocks and glass figurines no one wanted anymore. He moved past the aisle of tarnished jewelry and toward the back, where a cardboard box labeled Books Miscellaneous sat, half crushed beside a rusted coat rack. He didn't know what made him reach into it. Maybe habit. Maybe the way the box leaned like it had something to confess. The first few were nothing. A romance novel with yellowed pages, a children's picture book with marker stains, a paperback thriller with a torn cover. Then he saw it hardback. Leather-bound, green thread stitching the spine. A scratch across the corner. He knew that scratch. He'd made it with a house key the day before his second deployment, fumbling the lock while carrying Sophie in one arm. Emma had been mad for exactly 3 seconds before kissing his cheek. He opened the journal. Inside, her handwriting, loopy and slanted, like she always wrote when she was tired. He sat down on the wooden bench beside the window, knees cracking. The journal creaked as he opened the first few pages. The early entries were mundane. Grocery lists tucked between paragraphs. Notes about Sophie's favorite songs. One line read, "Jacob likes his coffee too hot. Says it reminds him he's alive." He ran his fingers across the ink as if touch could bring sound. The entries shifted after a while. Gaps between dates. More mentions of Cole. Cole fixed the sink today. He didn't ask, just did it. Sophie keeps asking when her father's coming home. I told her he's in the stars watching. I didn't cry today. Is that bad? Then page 47. The handwriting changed. Not the shape, just the pressure. The pen dug deeper into the paper, like it was fighting back. They told me he was dead, but the words didn't feel true. Jacob's breath caught. The letter came folded like something ashamed. No photos, just a name, and Coley was already there. Said it was best not to look too long. Grief is hard enough. Grief in a stranger's hands is unbearable. The next entry was shorter. The pen trailed off at the end of the page. He holds Sophie like she's breakable. I want to scream, but I say thank you instead. Then page 48. No date. Just 2 lines. The ink shook. Her hand clearly. He watches me sleep, not like Jacob did. Jacob closed the book, not roughly, not in rage. In morning. He pressed the journal to his chest and leaned forward. His forehead touched the cool glass of the pawn shop window. Outside, cars moved like nothing had ever broken. He flipped back to the first page. A sticky note had been wedged between the cover and the spine. Nearly invisible. It read, "If you find this, it means I couldn't carry it anymore. Forgive me, Jacob." He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. Behind the counter, the shop owner eyed him cautiously. Jacob walked up, journal in hand. "How much?" he asked. The man squinted. "That old thing?" $5. Jacob placed a 20 on the counter. "Keep the change." Outside, the wind had picked up. He stood by the open tailgate of his truck, the journal resting on the folded blanket where Sophie used to nap during long drives. He flipped through it again, slower this time, looking for the pieces between the pages. One entry stood out now. From early March. Cole says I should think about selling the house. Says memories live in things too long, they rot. But Jacob built that deck with his bare hands. I don't want to forget the splinters. Some betrayals don't burn bridges. They repaint them. Jacob stared at his own handwriting on the back of a grocery receipt that Emma had glued in. Bananas, bread. One more day with you. He folded the journal closed. Tighter this time. But not in anger. In preservation. Back home, his temporary apartment. The one with bare walls and a fridge that hummed like it missed being useful. He placed the journal on the table. He opened his laptop. Plugged in the USB. The screen flickered. The files began. Loading. Photos, audio, one labeled Ambush Debrief, Unit 17. He didn't click play yet. He just stared at it. Then at the journal. The two were mirrors now. One told what happened. The other told how it felt. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. The worst part wasn't that they moved on. It was that they were made to. Jacob now had proof she didn't forget. She was made to forget. To unmake a man, first erase his witness. The diner was half lit, half forgotten. The kind of place where silverware clinked softly and coffee sat on burners long past fresh. Jacob picked the booth farthest from the door, back to the wall. Some instinct stayed sharp even after the bullets stopped. The waitress brought him black coffee without asking. He didn't touch it. Instead, he watched the door like he expected it to speak first. At 3:07 p.m., the door opened. A man stepped in, walking with a limp Jacob could name just by sound. Left leg. 2 surgeries, nerve damage. Kyle Brenner. Same unit. Same convoy. Same explosion. He hadn't seen Kyle since before that day. He walked slower now, clothes loose on a frame that had once bench-pressed 2 Jacob-sized duffels for fun. He carried no bag, no jacket, just a cigarette tucked behind his ear and a silence that didn't come from peace. When Kyle sat across from him, he didn't smile. Just looked. Long and hollow. You shouldn't be here, Kyle said, voice like gravel. I could say the same. I thought you were dead. You signed the helmet they buried. Kyle looked down. Sometimes the ones who mourn you are the ones who helped bury you. I need answers, Jacob said. Kyle said nothing. Jacob reached into his coat, pulled out the copy of the forged death report, slid it across the table. Kyle's eyes flicked to it. He didn't touch it. Cole's name is on every page, Jacob said. Kyle swallowed. He made the calls. You mean he made sure I didn't come back? Kyle leaned back, hand to his temple. You don't understand. Then help me. Outside, a truck passed too loud, too fast. The windows shook. Neither flinched. Jacob leaned in. I remember the blast, the heat. And then his voice. Cole was pulling me out. Kyle nodded once. He did. But what? He said you'd seen too much, asked too many questions. He said if you came back, the whole thing would collapse. What thing? Kyle finally looked him in the eye. Supply reroutes. Phantom drop zones. Equipment that never existed. On paper, but showed up in private hands. I didn't know how deep until after. You kept quiet. I kept breathing. Jacob sat back, cold all the way into his hands. Who else? He asked. Kyle shook his head. Not here. Then where? There's a place, Kyle said. Storage unit just outside Hanover. He used to keep backups, paper ones. He was paranoid about digital. Jacob narrowed his eyes. You're giving him up now? Kyle laughed once short, bitter. Because I can't sleep. And because I saw your daughter's face in the paper last week. Jacob froze. Back to school spread. Local feature. She's got your eyes. Kyle reached into his back pocket, pulled out a photo folded 4 times. It was Sophie. 6 years old, smile crooked, holding a sign. Jacob took it in shaking fingers. He stared too long. She was wearing the jacket he sent Emma from base, the one with the stitched daisy. The truth wasn't just buried, it was dressed up and paraded. In daylight, you think he planned the blast? Jacob asked, not ready for the answer. I think he knew it was coming, and didn't warn me. Kyle looked away. He made sure you were in that truck. The waitress refilled their coffee. Neither man touched the mugs. Jacob looked at Kyle. Why are you really helping me? Kyle's fingers drummed on the table. He stared out the window like it might confess something. Then he said, almost too soft, because I tried to stop it. The night before, I radioed in a route change. I thought it would delay you, reroute the convoy. But the orders got overwritten. He knew, and he made it stick. And you've been carrying that since? Kyle nodded once. I've lost everything. Jacob said. Kyle's voice cracked. Me too. Jacob stood slowly, tucked the photo into his breast pocket, left cash on the table. As he reached the door, Kyle spoke again. You were never supposed to wake up. Jacob turned halfway. That's what Cole said. Kyle nodded, word for word. Outside, the sun was too bright. It made the pain in. Jacob's leg throbbed. He walked back to his truck, started the engine, then stopped. He reached into the glove box, pulled out the notebook again, flipped to the dog-eared page. Under Supply Chain Oddities, -2009. A list of initials, dates, one name circled 3 times. C. Mathers. Jacob tapped the page with his finger, then drew a slow red line under it. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. Cole didn't just steal his life, he tried to end it. Even ghosts knock before entering. The gate didn't creak. It hummed open with quiet wealth-clean steel, fresh paint, no room for rust. Jacob stood there a moment longer than he needed to, one hand still gripping the forged casualty report folded in thirds. The paper was warm now, soft at the corners, like it had spent too long pressed against his chest. The driveway curved like a polite throat toward the house-white stone. Wide windows, a porch too perfect to hold grief. He stepped forward. Each footfall landed like memory. His boots sank slightly into the crushed gravel. The same boots he wore when Cole pulled him from burning metal. The same boots they said were found beside non-recoverable remains. He had been declared gone by the same man who helped carry him out. He reached the front door. There was no bell, just a brass knocker shaped like a lion's mouth. He didn't use it. He knocked with his knuckles. Twice. Then again. Harder. Footsteps came. Slow, unhurried. Then the door opened. Cole stood there in linen pants and a navy shirt, barefoot. A glass of wine in his left hand. He didn't look shocked. Just tired. You're not supposed to be here, Cole said, sipping. Jacob stared. Neither are you. Cole stepped aside without a word. Jacob didn't move. You want to come in or just stand there looking righteous? Jacob entered. House smelled like lemon oil and silence. No photographs. No toys. No clutter. It smelled like Emma's attempt at control. Like someone had erased their family and repainted over the ghosts. Cole led him to the kitchen. A second glass sat ready on the counter. Jacob didn't touch it. I brought something, he said, and laid the folded report on the marble counter. Cole's eyes flicked to it. No reaction. I've read it, he said. Then you know it's a lie. I didn't write it. You signed it. Cole shrugged. Someone had to. Jacob stepped closer. Why me? Cole took a breath. Looked toward the window. Because you asked too many questions. You looked in places you weren't ordered to. You made it hard to keep things smooth. Smooth? That convoy you flagged? If it had stopped, $500,000 worth of scrap would've missed its delivery window. You weren't supposed to be in that truck. You put me there. I redirected. The command approved it. Jacob's voice dropped. You tried to kill me. Cole shook his head. I tried to keep control. You buried me alive. You survived. You took my wife. I didn't take anything, Cole snapped. She came to me. She was broken. You should have seen her the night the letter came. She fell apart on the kitchen floor. She didn't speak for 2 days. I picked up the pieces you left behind. You let her believe I was dead. I let her heal. Jacob stared. The pride drained from Cole's face. Just for a second, the man looked small. She loved you, Jacob, but you died. In her eyes you did. What was I supposed to do? Tell her the truth and watch her unravel again? You were supposed to wait. Cole's hand trembled, just slightly. He drank the rest of his wine. I didn't know you were alive. He sighed. You didn't want to know. Silence stretched. Outside, a wind chime tapped once. Jacob turned to the hallway. Where's Emma? Cole stiffened. She's upstairs. Jacob walked. Cole didn't stop him. He reached the stairwell. It still had the chip on the second step from when Sophie dropped a glass dinosaur. He ran his hand along the rail. Halfway up, she appeared. Emma. Hair pulled back, sweater too big. Bare feet on polished wood. She stopped. Her face froze, then slowly, it changed. Her lips parted. She didn't speak. Her eyes welled. She looked at Cole behind Jacob. And back again. You were dead. She whispered. Jacob didn't answer. Cole said. He said you didn't make it. He buried you himself. I read the report. Emma's voice cracked. They handed me a flag. Jacob looked down. And you handed him our life. She stepped backward. I didn't know. He looked up at her. Eyes glassy. Then why did you sell the house 2 weeks later? She blinked. What? I saw the papers. You sold it before Sophie even asked why the stars didn't twinkle anymore. Emma swayed slightly. Cole stepped into the hall. That's enough, he said. Jacob turned. No, it's not. He took the notebook from his pocket, flipped it open, showed Emma the page. March 29th. Promise housing to CM if Reese transfer fails. Her hand covered her mouth. Did you know? Emma? Jacob asked. Did you know he wrote me off before the blast? She said nothing. I didn't lose you, Jacob said. You were stolen. Cole stepped forward. You think you're the victim? You left her. You chose deployment over family. I chose duty. You chose distance. I chose survival. Cole's voice rose. You think being here makes you a hero again? You think a forged report erases the fact you left them vulnerable? Jacob walked toward him, close. Better to leave them vulnerable, he said softly, than to convince them they were alone. Sometimes betrayal walks in gently and sets the table like family. Emma was crying now, not loudly. Just enough to rust her breath. Jacob stepped past them both. Down the stairs. Out the front door. The sky had gone gold. The kind of dusk that felt like apology. He reached the gate. Opened it without sound. In his pocket, the folded death report crinkled like a whispered warning. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. Jacob didn't lose his family. They were stolen. Memory is a weapon, so is proof. It arrived with no knock, no postage, no explanation. Just a cardboard box sitting like a dare on Jacob's doorstep. No label, no return address, just his name, scrawled in pen that bled. At the corners from the morning dew. He brought it inside with quiet hands. The table was bare. He hadn't eaten yet. Couldn't. Not since Emma's eyes froze at the staircase. Not since Cole told the truth and still found a way to look proud doing it. Jacob sat. Peeled the tape slowly, like something inside might bleed. Inside, nestled in old cloth military green, frayed edges, was a field recorder. One of the older models, metal casing. Buttons that clicked when touched. There was a tape already inside. He stared at it for a long time before pressing play. The first sound was wind. Then boots on dirt. Then a voice. His own. Copy Reese. To Eagle 2. Grid is quiet. No movement. No sign of weight. Something's hold on. Another voice. Cole. Pull the pin. Do it. He's watching us. The tape hissed. Jacob froze. Then a third voice. Deeper. Calmer. Not one he recognized. It's done. Reese is marked. Make sure the next report reads dead. He paused the tape. His heart wasn't racing. It had gone still. He rewound the audio. Pressed play again. This time he listened to the silence between the words. Not the order. Not the act. The calmness of it. As if this wasn't betrayal. As if it was routine. He turned the recorder off. Set it gently on the table. His hand trembled. Thought of Kyle. Of the words scratched in the notebook. Of Emma's shaking hands. Of Sophie wearing a jacket she wasn't supposed to still have. He thought of how quiet Cole had been when he said, "She came to me broken." Some men don't steal lives. They reassign them. Jacob stood and paced the room. The recorder played. Again in his mind, Cole's voice. Tighter, like he wasn't speaking to Jacob, like he was reporting to someone. He's watching us, he thought it. Meant danger. Now Jacob understood. He was the danger, and someone had been watching him. Long before the blast, he walked to the back closet, pulled out the shoebox where he kept the fragments of the man he was before. Dog tags, a wedding band he never gave back. The ultrasound photo with Sophie's name and Emma's handwriting. He lifted the lid. Set the recorder inside, gently. Like burying something alive. Then he sat down again and pressed play one more time. This time, he listened to the breath, not the words. The way Cole sounded when he said, "Pull the pin." Not angry. Not panicked. Tired. And in that tiredness, Jacob found something. Fear. Cole wasn't just following orders. He was surviving them. Jacob leaned back in his chair. The house creaked in the quiet. The kind of sound that didn't come from movement, but from memory letting itself be heard. He opened his laptop. Plugged in the USB Kyle had given him. Folder after folder appeared. Documents, logs, shipment manifests. One stuck out. Vantage protocol, reclassification. He clicked. Inside dozens of names, dates, incident reports. Every one stamped with variations of the same sentence. Subject removed for compromise. He scrolled down, and there it was. Reese, Jacob D. Status. Compromised interference. Logged action. Forward to command clearance. Expedite casualty filing filed by. CM timestamp. April 1st, 1 month prior to IED deployment. You don't have to die to be killed. You just have to inconvenience someone with power. Jacob closed the file. He wasn't a casualty. He was a spreadsheet correction. He pulled out his phone. Dialed Kyle. Voicemail. He left none. Instead, he sat. Let the silence pool around him. The wine glass Cole held. The porch lights that hadn't flickered. The wind chime that always rang once before dying again. All of it. Choreographed. Not to make Jacob disappear, but to make sure when he returned. No one remembered who he was. He looked at the recorder one more time. He played the final section again. Reese is marked. Make sure the next report reads dead, not is dead. Reads dead. It wasn't a lie. It was a script. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. This war never ended. It just changed uniforms. Justice limps, but it arrives. The courthouse smelled like pine cleaner and fear. Not loud fear, the quiet kind. The kind that sat in pressed suits and chewed fingernails. That waited for names to be called like last rites. Jacob sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, breath slow. A black pen rolled once across the folder before him. He caught it with the same reflex he used to disarm charges. Across the aisle, Cole leaned back in his chair like the room owed him comfort. His suit was perfect, navy, tailored. His hands that once bandaged Jacob's. Side in the desert rested lightly on the table, Relaxed. Like none of this belonged to him. Like the betrayal was theoretical. The worst traitors don't twitch when exposed. They smile when you name them. The judge entered, robe heavy. Gaze tired. Jacob rose. So did Cole. They sat again, and the trial began. The prosecutor moved first. She laid the evidence like bones. The forged casualty report, the supply chain logs, the recorder with the voices that didn't stutter when they sealed Jacob's death with a whisper. Witnesses came. A clerk who'd risked her pension to pull a paper trail. A medical tech who remembered tagging Jacob's gear as misfiled. Then Kyle, limping, voice cracked from years of holding what should have been screamed. He spoke slowly, clearly. He wasn't supposed to be in the vehicle, Kyle said. He was moved. We were told it was protocol. But there was no briefing. Just silence. Cole didn't flinch. The defense took their turn. Their attorney painted Jacob as confused, possibly traumatized beyond memory. They said he misread documents, that he confused corruption with coincidence. They said Cole Mathers did what anyone would, care for a grieving widow, protect a child. Jacob watched as the truth bent itself into polite language. Then, the courtroom fell quiet. The judge looked up. You may speak, Mr. Reese. Jacob stood. He didn't bring notes. He didn't bring volume, only a folder with one photo inside. Sophie, age 3, holding his dog tags. Her smile wider than her face. He held it in one hand, thumb brushing the corner. I'm not here because I want something, he said. I'm here because something was taken. He turned to the jury. Not just money or records, but memory, identity, voice. His voice didn't crack. It slowed. I was declared dead before I ever got on the plane. Paper said so. Command signed it. And he, Jacob gestured to Cole, made sure no one asked questions. He paused. My daughter didn't recognize my face when I came back. My wife didn't believe her own handwriting when I showed her a page from her journal. That's not fate. That's design. The courtroom was still. He held the photo up. This is all I had of her while I healed in silence. And even this was almost taken. He set the photo down. Sat again. No one clapped. No one moved. But something shifted. Cole's wife, now seated behind the defense, looked down at her hands. Then at Cole. She leaned forward. She whispered something. And for the first time, Cole blinked like the mask had cracked. The judge leaned back. An hour passed. The jury filed out. Jacob stared at the clock. He didn't look at Cole, not when the jury returned, not when the foreman stood. We find the defendant liable. A breath escaped Jacob's throat, but he didn't feel lighter. Damages were announced. Statements ordered. Cole remained silent. After Jacob stepped into the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing. Sophie stood there. Taller now, 10, holding a notebook against her chest. Emma stood behind her. They didn't speak. Sophie walked forward. She reached into the notebook, pulled out a drawing. It was rough, pencil sketched. A man with a scar on his cheek. A little girl beside him. She handed it to Jacob, said nothing, smiled, and his hand still bandaged from the courtroom table shook. When he took it. Emma met his eyes. There was no apology. Just an ache. One that hadn't yet found its words. Justice doesn't erase history. It just leaves the door unlocked. He stepped outside. The sky was the same blue as the day he was declared gone. Reporters waited. Flashes clicked. He said nothing, just walked. Past them. Photo still in hand. Verdict in pocket. Sophie's drawing folded close to his heart. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. The verdict is in. But Jacob doesn't smile. You can't win someone's love back with facts. Jacob sat cross-legged on the floor, a pad of paper balanced on his knee. Across from him, Sophie hummed softly, her legs tucked beneath her as she chose a crayon color with care, a deep blue. The shade of quiet nights and worn denim. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Walls were lined with drawings. Stick figures with giant heads, rainbows curved over smiling suns, hearts that looked more like shields. Jacob watched her press the crayon to paper, her small fingers trembling slightly. She was focused, but not on him. Her eyes darted toward the window every now and then, as if waiting for something invisible. They'd been here before. Weeks of sessions with the therapist, slow, careful steps toward a child who didn't remember. Her father but felt the shape of absence like a shadow in the room. Jacob traced the scar along his left cheek. The one Sophie had kissed once, before she forgot. She asked about the soldier. Emma had whispered on the phone. The imaginary one, Jacob said. She wondered why you have the same scar. He hadn't told her it was real. Some marks are invisible to memory, but etched deep in skin. Sophie drew a figure, now large eyes, broad shoulders. She handed it to Jacob without a word. The label was shaky but clear. Dad? Jacob smiled, soft and small. The weight in his chest shifted just a fraction. Later, when Sophie was asleep, Jacob sat by the window, cradling the drawing. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of settling wood. He looked at the notebook beside him, the one filled with names, dates, fragments of betrayal. He thought about the courtroom, the verdict, the cost of truth. He thought about Emma's silence, her guarded glances, the way she held Sophie's hand a little too tight. He wondered if love was enough. Sometimes it whispered where justice couldn't speak. The hardest battles are fought in empty rooms. The scar burned faintly. Jacob closed his eyes. The drawing lay folded in his hand. Outside, the night held its breath. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. Some truths are folded into envelopes we were never meant to open. She remembered the day her mother left, the whistle of the train as it pulled away, the clasp of Emma's locket on her finger, the way her hair smelled of chrysanthemums. That was 10 years ago, but she still felt the echo. Now, at 13, Sophie stood before the bathroom mirror, steam curling at the edges of glass. The world beyond the door hummed. Distant laughter, a car engine idling. She scraped at the caulk, fingers probing the shadow behind the mirror's frame until they brushed something thin and soft. A folded envelope, yellowed at the fold. No stamp, no postmark. Just her mother's handwriting, Jacob Reese. She tore it open. Inside, the paper trembled with the weight of confession. I know you're alive. I feel it every time you breathe. He watches her sleep like he owns her. I'm scared. Her heart stuttered. The words blurred as tears fell, then stung when they dried. A single line of truth can drown you in silence. She read again. I feel it every time you breathe. The phrase settled in her chest like a stone. Sophie pressed the letter to her face. Downstairs, the hallway light flickered. She slipped the note into her pocket and fled into the night. Outside, the rain welcomed her like a friend who forgives everything. The sky was a curtain of gray turned silver, raindrops tapping her parka hood like Morse code. She ran, mouth open to the sky, letting cold wash away the years of unspoken fear. She reached Jacob's house on Cypress Lane, the one still marked on the mailbox he never forgot. The porch light was on, warm halo against the wet night. She knocked once. No answer. Twice. She heard steps. He opened the door. Eyes tired, jacket damp. He held a folder in one hand, a forgotten coffee mug in the other. Sophie stared. He looked like a man hung between two worlds, the one he remembered, and the one that had nearly erased him. She said nothing. He knelt, tried to speak. The rain trailed down his sleeves, dripped from his chin. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones left unsaid. She pulled the letter from her pocket. Trembling fingers offered it to him. He took it gently, unfolded it. Under the porch light, his voice cracked. Emma wrote this? She nodded once. Tears slid free. He looked up at her. The scar on his cheek was faint in the yellow glow, her scar now too, the one she had traced in her sleep. He touched it softly, as if confirming it was real. Sophie swallowed. She was scared. He closed the letter, placed it in his jacket, then reached behind his back, unvelcroed the pocket of his parka, and pulled out something else. An identical envelope. She blinked. He opened it. Inside another note, shorter. I never stopped loving you. Come back. Her mother's words, written that same night but sent nowhere. He scanned it, voice low. She never mailed this. Sophie shook her head. I found it. Behind the mirror. He folded both letters together. She tried to tell me. How did you not? I was next door, he said. I thought she was safe. I thought the file, the other things. If I got help, she could heal. He looked at the ground. I was broken too. Emotional reversal. Betrayal softened into guilt. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one who leaves you behind. He stepped aside. Come in. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and old paper. Photos lined the mantel. Sophie's 6th birthday, Emma's smile, both of them blurred at the edges. Sophie walked to the fireplace. Furs stood in the hearth. She picked one up, hand-carved, its grain worn smooth. She'd carved it herself when she was 5. He watched her. You kept that. She turned. I waited. They said I died, he whispered. I wasn't supposed to come back. She held up her hands. I drew stars for you. He led her to the living room. On the table lay a stack of notebooks and photos. All the fragments of the story he'd collected: journals, tapes, court papers. Reconstruction is a monument built from shards of broken promises. He sat and patted the couch beside him. She sat. They opened the notebooks. He showed her the entries where Emma's handwriting trembled, the lines where she wrote about feeling watched, the photo of Sophie crossed out. The recorder taped transcripts. She traced a page with her fingertip. She didn't forget me. I'm sorry I wasn't here, he said. Voice so soft she almost missed it. Sophie shook her head. You came back. They sat in silence, the rain drumming against the windows, a quiet applause for a reunion. They didn't know they needed. He stood, moved to the bookshelf, and pulled out the field recorder, the one that carried Cole's voice and the unknown third speaker. He clicked it off long ago. He placed it on the table. This holds the end of one story. She nodded, and the start of another. He smiled, small and unsteady, reached for her hand, their fingers intertwined. A scar and a question mark pressed together. She tilted her head. Will we be okay? He looked into her eyes, the eyes that used to call him daddy before he was erased. He brushed a raindrop from her cheek. We're rediscovering what was hidden. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. Sophie rested her head on his shoulder. And in that moment, the house exhaled. Some families aren't rebuilt. They're rediscovered. Time doesn't heal. It hands you tools. He sat on the bench just beyond the courthouse steps, the wood worn smooth where countless others had waited, some for verdicts, some for good news, some for no news at all. The air was crisp, late autumn, and leaves drifted past like forgotten letters. His coat was buttoned too high against a chill that wasn't entirely in the wind. Some benches are better at holding stories than people. Across the pavement, the courthouse doors gleamed. He remembered once standing there, clenched folder in hand, waiting for a justice that limped toward him. Today, he needed no verdict. He'd carried everyone he'd ever wanted inside himself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded drawing Sophie had given him 10 years ago, the figure with big eyes labeled Dad. The paper was brittle now, edges frayed. He folded it carefully and tucked it beside him. Memories are like old paper, they tear at the creases. A young woman approached, shoulders straight, backpack slung lightly over one arm. She slowed when she saw him and smiled, an echo of Emma's, a reflection of his own hope. Sophie, now in college, carrying coffee in a travel mug. He stood, awkwardly. She offered the mug. Their eyes met. "Morning," she said, voice hushed but clear. "Thought you might like something warm." He took the mug, thumb brushing her fingers. "Thank you." He inhaled coffee and autumn leaves. They stood side by side, watching the courthouse. Their reflections shimmered on the glass. Father and daughter, both older, both bearing scars. She sipped. "Do you ever think about what was stolen?" He turned to her, surprised. "All the time." She placed her mug on the bench between them. "I don't. I think about what we built from what was left." He looked down at the mug. Chipped rim. Bleached spots where water sat. Just like the mug Emma used to send him from the hospital. He remembered the night Sophie was born. He'd held the mug for Emma, hands shaking, tears in both their eyes. Pride and horror mingled. He'd called that survival. Emotional reversal. Comfort turned to loss. Loss turned to something like grace. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, his old field journal, the one he thought he'd lost. He'd written supply codes, mission notes, fragments of letters he never sent. She handed it to him. "You left this in the courthouse library," she said. "I found it last year." He opened it. The pages were filled with neat circles, scratch-outs, names, dates. On the last page, a single sentence. "Home is where the heart remembers your name." He'd written that after Emma kissed his scar and told him she'd wait. He closed the journal, ran his finger along the spine. "She wrote that." She shook her head. "You did." He met her gaze. "Memory is a weapon, so is faith." She nodded. "We're alive, Dad." They sat. The bench held them. The courthouse stood silent behind. He cleared his throat. "I almost lost you again last week." Her brow furrowed. "What happened?" He gestured at his coat. The scar on his cheek caught a stray sunbeam. "I saw Cole in the lobby." He looked smaller. I wondered if he still believed he'd won. Sophie listened, lips pressed together. "Did he?" He exhaled. "For a moment, I thought the war was over. Then I remembered some battles aren't fought with guns." She reached out, touched his scar. "This one is." He smiled softly. "Only because I let it be." They fell silent. The wind rustled. The leaves, each one a small drumbeat in the hush. Healing isn't rebuilding. It's redefining. He folded the drawing from long ago and placed it inside the journal. Between the pages where Sophie's voice still whispered hope. She watched him. "Will you ever worry?" He looked up. "Worry about what?" "About being erased again." He closed the journal. "I used to wait for the door to open, for someone to remember I was here. But now," he patted the bench, "I think I'm already home." Her eyes shone. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling her heartbeat steady against him. "If justice still matters, you'll want the next page." The sun dipped lower, painting the courthouse in gold. The leaves finished their dance and came to rest in piles around their feet. Jacob finally breathed deep, full, and free. And for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't waiting for the door to open. He was already home.